Hi there and welcome to Explains the Wrap, simple news summaries for busy people. So here at Explain, we pride ourselves on having a sense of humour. So we were counting down the days until today, April 1st. Delighted to be sending out the wrap on such an auspicious day, April Fool's Day. We toyed with several ideas to fool you, as is the tradition for newspapers generally. But we have to admit defeat, dear reader. Between the ongoing push for the Western Cape to secede from South Africa, no really, and a stuck container ship single-handedly pitching global supply chains into crisis, we just could not invent anything simultaneously more believable yet utterly absurd than the real headlines. Here's hoping the globe's strong prankster energy eases up soon, or satirists and comedians everywhere will be out of a job. In the meantime, here's what you need to know about some of these stories and more. Enjoy! First up, you've probably heard about Ace Magashule. The ANC's top dogs and its National Executive Committee, the NEC, drew a line in the sand on Tuesday. Those accused of corruption or serious crimes must step aside within 30 days or be suspended. This is a victory for President Cyril Ramaphosa, who managed to sway the 86-member NEC in his favour in a torturous weekend meeting, and this comes after months of intense internal factional battles. The step-aside rule has preoccupied the ruling party and dominated political news since last year. Now, this rule is not new. It was first approved at the NEC conference in 2017, but it resurfaced last August as public pressure increased on the party to take action against compromised leaders within its ranks. There are many of these, and I'm not going to list them all now, but they've all pretty much defied this rule, and the star of the show is ANC Secretary General Ace Magashule. As Secretary General, he is at the top of the party. He's in the top 6, and he really should know better. But Magashule's list of alleged crimes is long. There's a whole book written about it by Peter Louis Myburg if you want to know more. But the one thing that he's been charged and briefly arrested for before being released on bail related to a dodgy 255 million rand asbestos deal when he was Free State Premier. Now, the contract was supposed to remove damaging substances from Free State homes. It didn't do that. Instead, the costs were vastly inflated, allegedly funneling cuts to Magashule's cronies. By the way, the good news on the story is that the Hawks were quick to seize and freeze assets of many of those accused. But back to Magashule. With the verdict out, will Ace play the game? The verdict is unlikely. In an analysis for the Daily Maverick, Stephen Grootes wrote that Magashule is likely to refuse to step aside. That will lead to a process of suspension, and he is likely to challenge that suspension in court. This would create a situation in which the legal representative of the ANC, which is the Secretary General, is taken to court by the Secretary General of the ANC. It would look like legal nonsense, which may well be Magashule's aim. Magashule has also said that he'll be seeking counsel from previous party leaders in this time. This, of course, means Jacob Zuma, and so expect to see another Nkandla T, as the likes of Thabo Mbeki have already made their disdain clear. Now, Ramaphosa also made it clear in reading the decision on Tuesday that this was a final decision, but a month is a long time. At this point, we don't know what other cards Ace might have up his sleeve, ha ha ha. But that doesn't mean he plans to start his own party, as some may speculate. Magashule confirmed to News 24 that he would never establish a new party, adding that I remain a loyal member of the ANC. If that's the case, Mr. Magashule, then maybe you should start acting like it. Moving on to our big story. South Africa's vaccine rollout demystified. We know we spoke about this last week, but there still seems to be some confusion over what's happening with South Africa's vaccine rollout strategy. Here are the answers to some of the most common questions and misunderstandings that we've come across. Firstly, there's this idea that government bungled the acquisition of vaccines, and that's why we're behind the entire world. Look, South African authorities were slow to the vaccination acquisition party. That is true. But there are many other factors at play. Unequal access to vaccines is a global issue, with developed countries hoarding the lot. Most developing countries were only able to start rollouts in March, like us. Second misconception, that South Africa is far behind on its rollout plans. Look, this one is true. The initial plan was to inoculate South Africa's 1.5 million health workers by the end of March. But the AstraZeneca vaccine we purchased was showed to be of limited use against the dominant variant. It would have been a huge risk to go ahead and roll it out anyway, despite what the DA has argued for that situation. The other one is that phase one of the rollout has been a mess. Now, this is a very important one because what is often misunderstood, probably because of government's poor communication around this, is that the current rollout phase one isn't really a full rollout. It's part of the clinical trial phase, a study. We said this last week, but it's an important point to note. Given that it's a test, the Johnson & Johnson's vaccines that we are now using that are being used in the study only arrive in batches of 80,000 about every 2 weeks. This, of course, limits the number of people we can actually vaccinate in this first rollout. The full rollout will have millions of vaccines and thousands of rollout sites are planned, so of course it will be different. And the final misconception is that we'll never get enough vaccines and we're going to be stuck in this situation forever. Firstly, this week Ramaphosa said that in addition to the 11 million J&J vaccines already procured, another 20 million J&J doses have been secured, along with 20 million more from Pfizer. Negotiations are underway to procure other vaccines, including Russia's Sputnik 5. But there's a bigger thing here. Countries in the developed world will soon hit a surplus of vaccines, given that they procured more than their populations needed. So later this year, we're likely to see the global market for vaccines moving from scarcity to surplus, and that will benefit us. We could probably get a lot of those vaccines cheaply. So there is light at the end of the vaccination tunnel. Moving on to your briefs. South Africa bids a warm farewell to a broadcasting legend. For nearly 4 decades, Nonqolo Grootboom has greeted SABC news viewers tuning in for the isiXhosa news. A calm, warm professional, this public servant, because at our best, that's what all journalists are, has kept millions informed. Her last broadcast on Tuesday night generated national interest that reached all the way to the top office in the land. At the request of loads of South Africans, the president himself postponed his scheduled COVID update by half an hour so that people wouldn't have to choose between him and Grootboom. The 60-year-old broadcaster was so moved by this decision that she broke down in tears. When 7 p.m. rolled around, Grootboom was ready. She was dressed in a stunning black and white mbaqo, which is isiXhosa regalia. This was designed by a small business owner from Gqeberha, who came all the way to the SABC studios in Johannesburg to give the outfit to Grootboom. And of course, Gqeberha is what we used to call PE. It was a beautiful garment for a beautiful occasion. Grootboom bowed out with her trademark isiXhosa phrase, which translated means, "I love you all at home." At home, we loved her too, and love the reminder that South Africa, for all its weird and wild moments, recognizes greatness and knows how to celebrate the people who matter most. Moving on, in case you missed it, here's what you're not allowed to do this weekend and what you are allowed to do. As we anticipated last week, President Ramaphosa announced some changes to lockdown regulations ahead of the Easter holidays. We're still on level 1, but here's a quick recap of what you can and can't do over the long weekend. Curfew remains midnight to 4 a.m. This means you can't go out between those times, so get home before that. Beaches, parks and dams are open provided all COVID-19 protocol is observed. Interprovincial travel is allowed if crucial. And the sale of alcohol for off-site consumption will be prohibited on Friday, Saturday, Sunday and Monday, so that's the entire long weekend, but will be allowed on site from restaurants, shebeens and bars up until 11 o'clock. You won't be allowed to travel with alcohol if you're going to visit family and friends, and indoor gatherings are limited to 250 people or 50% of the venue's capacity, and the figure is 500 for outdoor gatherings. With that in mind, enjoy the weekend and be safe. On to some other news on the labour front. SABC finally bites the bullet on retrenchments. It was a difficult decision, but the SABC finally got its way after valiantly fighting through political pushback. 621 employees were retrenched after the process began as far back as 2018. It had to happen. The SABC has a crazy wage bill of 3 billion rand, and Business Day reports that employees earn 800,000 rand a year on average. My goodness. Us taxpayers can't keep bailing them out. That money is coming directly, well not directly, but in a large part from us. But that didn't make it any easier to watch so many people lose their jobs or take the hit for years of mismanagement by head honchos and government. One broadcaster, Desiree Chowke, broke down in tears while reading a bulletin about her own retrenchment and that of her colleagues. Now, of that 621, just over half, 346 employees, opted for voluntary severance packages. This means they didn't opt for alternative employment, while 275 employees were let go because the positions they occupied were apparently redundant. As Business Day put it in an editorial, it's the SABC CEO, Madoda Maqwe, has made a bold move by doing what he promised. It's a decisive break from the past. On to international news. You know how bad traffic can get when just one car breaks down in the middle of the highway? Now imagine that happening at sea, except it's not one car, it's a massive 400-meter long container ship. And instead of the highway, it was wedged in Egypt's Suez Canal for a whole week. Yes, we're talking about the Ever Given. About 12% of global trade, mostly liquefied gas, crude oil, and coffee, goes through the Suez, according to Bloomberg. So trade delays were inevitable. For example, Europeans might have to go easy on the coffee because containers of the Robusta coffee, the type used in Nescafe, were caught up in the traffic jam. The ripple effect of the blockage will be felt throughout the globe. You know what else is going around the world though? Memes. You may have seen a few doing the rounds based on what happened in the canal. There are so many and they are hilarious, so you really should look them up. But our personal favorite is the popular one showing the huge ship behind a smaller crane trying to help it out. People are using the large ship as a metaphor for big problems and the crane as a solution that hardly helps. Say my to-do list, which is the big ship, and my progress, which is this tiny crane that looks a little bit ridiculous alongside it. We can all relate. On to some more serious international news right here in our region. You may have heard that ISIS is on our doorstep in northern Mozambique, and OMG, what the heck, that's a terrifying thought. But it's not as simple as that. The situation has caught our attention because at least 43 South Africans have been caught up in ongoing attacks on civilians and foreigners in the Cabo Delgado province in northern Mozambique, according to News 24. Now, scary reports have emerged of South Africans and others holed up in a hotel, trying to escape, running out of food. Comms have been cut off, so we can't tell how many have been killed or what the status is. But this is not a new story. The impoverished region has long been a battleground as the country's gas, ruby and mineral wealth was funneled to business and political elites, and the poor saw no change in their circumstances or future. This is fertile ground for radicalism. Since 2017, there have been repeated attacks by armed militants, leaving scores of people dead. Thousands have been displaced. Now, Total, the company, previously stopped operations until authorities could guarantee stability. The recent attacks took place after the company restarted its work. Now, local armed militant groups behind the attack are seemingly Muslim minorities. The organization and others use the name for the insurgents Al-Shabaab, which means the youth, and has no links to other Al-Shabaabs in the world. One expert on the conflict and area, Joseph Hanlon, wrote for New Frame that labels are really important when discussing civil war. Amnesty International and other analysts have agreed that Al-Shabaab does not refer to ISIS or some kind of global Muslim terrorism movement. But that hasn't stopped the Islamic State, aka ISIS, from claiming responsibility for the attacks, which is something they often do. And furthermore, US military and other Western powers are getting involved. It's starting to become a proxy war for a much larger global fight. But as Hanlon put it quite brilliantly, this isn't really about ideologies. It's about people being robbed of opportunities and, heading towards radicalism, which is a problem. As he puts it, if jobs were created and marginalization reduced, the war could be stopped. Sadly, it looks as if the gas companies, the Frelimo elite, who are the party in charge of Mozambique, and the US building a new Cold War, they would much rather do that, build a new Cold War, than fight Let's try that again. The Frelimo elite and the US, who are building a new Cold War, would rather fight mythical global Islamist terrorists. And that he means instead of actually doing the hard work of building inclusive growth and giving people jobs. So that is a really sad story on all fronts. On to some funny news. KFC dropped its trademark slogan, finger licking good, in August 2020 because it says that licking fingers is not advised during COVID-19 times. No, really, this is a real story. It's not an April Fool's joke. So it took to the world's best advisory committee, Twitter, for some help in replacing its slogan. It's looking to borrow a slogan from another company until #we can finger lick again, and wants to know what people will think will suit it best. We Explain like to join in on the fun. So KFC, how about a play on Red Bull gives you wings to KFC gives you wings? Because we'd really like some wings. I'm sure so would you. Moving on to our accountability monitor. It's too easy for our attention to move on from injustice and for us to lose track of the slow process to create justice. The deadly Marikana massacre in 2012 is a case in point. It's been 9 years now. The Farm Commission of Inquiry, which investigated the massacre, wrapped up in 2015. But that wasn't the end of it. Following that inquiry, a panel of experts has put together 134 recommendations on how the police can properly handle protests in large crowds to try and prevent another Marikana. On Monday, Police Minister Bheki Cele announced what his department is doing and will continue to do to comply with the recommendations. Core issues being addressed include the SAP's strategy and policy, the professionalism and demilitarization of the police, as well as more transparency and accountability within SAP's units. The officers involved in the massacre are being criminally prosecuted, and the families of the victims have been compensated. So it's taken a long time, but we are starting to see justice for Marikana. Now look, there is a much more to be done, as illustrated by the recent killing of Mtukwazisi Ntumba, who was shot dead allegedly by police during protests by Wits University students just weeks ago, as we reported. There was also Collins Khoza, who was killed during lockdown, and so many more. So we welcome any moves that see our police becoming the people's servants rather than our enemy. Finally, as we usher you into the Easter holidays, which is a celebration of the crucifixion and resurrection of Jesus Christ for Christian believers, we would also like to wish our Jewish community well as Passover comes to an end. We hope you feasted well in celebration of the liberation of your ancestors from Egypt, and hold tight, you'll be able to eat bread again soon. To our Hindu community, we hope you had a bright and beautiful Holi recently, which is a celebration of love and the triumph of good over evil. And finally, to our Muslim community, we wish you well ahead of the fast during the coming holy month of Ramadan. And for everyone else, have a splendid break. That's it from us at The Wrap, a product of explain.co.za, simple news summaries for busy people. Remember to share the love, tell your friends to sign up for the updates at explain.co.za/subscribe. Till next time, goodbye from me and the rest of the team.